Thanks again for being with us. So this is basically the ending of the conference. We hope that you've enjoyed everything so far, and that, again, we have an opportunity to kind of recognize and thank everybody here at the table that's blessed us with their time and their knowledge and their wisdom. And I was pretty blown away, Susan, that synchronicity is actually considered part of a strategy, because I'm kind of obsessed with synchronicities, but that's pretty interesting. Thank you. But thank you for being with us and sharing what you did, because at these conferences mostly it is technical, and in terms of the technologies and showing, and you've been kind of behind the scenes as far as a lot of this crowd goes, working on a lot of this stuff and kind of moving it forward in ways that most of us have no experience with. And with a lot of the social network marketing, your experience, can you share once we get started a little bit more about what the emotional intelligence concept really kind of is and how it fits into this?
Absolutely.
And everything, and the background and the universities and organizations that speak very highly of your work. It's incredible to have somebody like you willing to spend a weekend with us. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much.
And Jean Manning, she's kind of been blazing the trail since before most people ever heard of free energy or Tesla technologies. One of the things that wasn't mentioned during her introduction last night is that, is anybody here familiar with the article, Attractions of Magnetism?
Of course, I just don't remember the title. She's in all the books.
Well, what magazine was that in?
Atlantis Rising.
So in Atlantis Rising, and that was around 1999 or
I can't remember.
2000, something like that. It was roughly 20 years ago or something, and this article called Attractions of Magnetism featured a girl named Shawnee Bauman, who was a 10-year-old girl who her father worked at the end of the building where John Bedini's electronics company was back then around 1999. And her father brought her over to John's shop because there was a Coeur d'Alene science fair for the kids there, and John taught her, she did it all herself, laid out the schematics and everything and gave it to her, and then she built a little Bedini SG, and SG stands for schoolgirl, which is John's poking people in the eye that, if a little schoolgirl can do it, what's wrong with you? And she made it work, and she won the prize, and that article that talks about it, I guess back then the term something going viral wasn't even a term yet, but essentially it went viral, and that's what helped spread a lot of the message about John's work and brought massive attention around the world into this whole field. And so it's kind of a historical article that deserves a lot of recognition for what it really is. And of course, a lot of the contributions with your books, and I think the first time I was learned about you, was it in Clash of the Geniuses, or it was, yeah, and so somebody gave me a copy of that a long time ago. I think it was Lawrence Kennedy, and that was the first time that I was made aware of your work and your contributions, and so thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And then Walt Jenkins, like I mentioned, Moray King, he spoke last year and gave a presentation last year, and he was very insistent. Actually, he started his presentation off showing a YouTube video of a segment about Walt's technology, and which, like I mentioned, Moray King, considers Walt, he's the Stanley Meyer of today, who's brought the water fuel concept further than anybody else has brought it. And Moray King, knowing my passion about the plasma ignition circuit and what its potential capabilities are, could see that that could potentially be a union of technologies, something else that could possibly come out of this conference. And we connected and kind of hit it off, and he expressed interest in coming to this kind of conference, which is this the first kind of thing like this that you've done and openly
Yeah.
kind of talked about your technology.
Yeah.
And you know, even though some things are kept proprietary, some people, even like Jim Murray at his first talk, you know, he didn't reveal circuits and a lot of that kind of stuff. He talked more about his background, kind of where he came from and everything, because that was the first time he came to our conference to kind of orient everybody to what his background is and everything. And so, you know, little by little, I think there might be more learning down the road. But just to be able to, you know, stay kind of behind the scenes, you know, very, very quiet, and being willing to, you know, share your time with us this weekend, we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Paul, how do you pronounce your name? I've heard several variations.
I pronounce it La Violette.
La Violette. So I think I actually got it right last night?
Yeah.
La Violette?
Yeah,
Okay.
fine.
And, you know, like I said, Guy Obolinski is the one who turned me on to his book, which featured his work in there, which is, you covered a little bit in the presentation. You had a slide on it.
The Secrets
Yeah.
book, yeah.
Yeah. And website is starburstfound.org.
.org, yeah.
And just found.org.
Yes, starburstfound.org.
And
Also,
and
etheric.com.
etheric.com.
Yeah.
And actually, it was Gene who suggested, because when I'm kind of kicking around some ideas on, you know, what do we want to have at the conference, Jean's one of the first people that I ask, because, you know, she has the biggest Rolodex on the planet practically when it comes to people in this field of who's, you know, who's doing what, and who's involved with real technologies, and she's the one that recommended you. And that's why I got a hold of you, and thankfully you're available this weekend to be with us. You know, you have a lot of fans, like, you know, Paul Babcock is your biggest fan in the world, in more ways than one. He's 6'4". And so anyway, thank you so much.
And I also read Seth Speaks.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for being with us this weekend. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Professor Herlick, you know, a couple years ago, when he introduced himself to me and said he had something interesting to show at next year's conference, which was last year's conference, and gave an incredible presentation on the diamagnetic and paramagnetic field experiments. You know, you have a, you know, you've forgotten more than most of us will learn in a lifetime, probably. If you really look at his bio, it would take probably about a half an hour to read it. I mean, the things that he's been involved with is absolutely incredible. And you know, fortunately, you'll be able to share your time with us this year. And just kind of your contributions to me in terms of, you know, just suggestions on what direction to go at the conference and how to improve it, like suggesting that, you know, somebody that attended actually gives a presentation and presents their findings on something that they learned about at the conference. And so that's why Yaro Stanchak gave that presentation. Even these two microphones out there in the audience were his suggestion. So I'm paying attention as much as I can, but, you know, it's kind of been a tough year since John passed away, and, you know, moving stuff out of his company. There's other things that I wanted to do with, you know, conference proceedings and this kind of thing. And so, you know, I still consider myself kind of an amateur at doing this. I'm just doing it because nobody else is doing it for me. And so, you know, might be a little bit bumpy and might get off track a little bit. But anyway, thank you for being with us and sharing your knowledge.
Well,
And,
thank you,
yeah.
Aaron.
And your wife.
And my wife.
Who wound the coils on his demonstration that he showed us in his presentation. And Paul, one of my local partners in crime, you know, we always working together kind of behind the scenes on a few, you know, pretty cool projects and stuff. And it's really been a blessing to have you as a friend and mentor. And he's definitely one of the resident wizards that, you know, if I have a question on, you know, what about this or this, what approach, he doesn't even have to think about it. He just thought, you know, in 2 seconds, okay, well, boom, boom. So it's like really nice to be able to, you know,
Always glad to share.
have a friend that's, yeah, open to sharing and helping me out. And, you know, the MWO, the concepts that Paul shared is really profound. You know, I sat in it myself. I am very sensitive. I can feel what's going on. I did have an incredible night's sleep. I have to shove some toilet paper in my ears though, because some of the buzzing and stuff is a little bit kind of extreme for me. But he.
I leave the Coronas so I can.
Right, right.
They're really not supposed to be there.
Yeah. And he's been extremely busy with his company, and so for him to be able to take this weekend out to be with us is quite a sacrifice with everything that you have going on, and I know you didn't have to do it.
No, actually, it's not a sacrifice. It's a great vacation.
So, well, thanks for being with us this weekend, Paul.
It's a pleasure.
So I guess if anybody has questions, go ahead and come up to the mic, or if any of you have anything that you want to start off with, feel free.
Yeah, emotional intelligence, one of my favorite subjects, and everybody needs to know about it. And there's this doctor named Dr. Daniel Goldman who wrote the book, Emotional Intelligence. And I read it about, God, at least 20 years ago. But I keep copies of it around. I make my staff read it. If I'm dealing with companies who have a bunch of weird-ass management that are a bunch of little kids, I make them read it. I've walked out of business meetings, came back with it, and said, after you read this book, come talk to me. And I'm telling you, it's one of the most important books ever wrote. If you want to be an effective human being, it's about understanding yourself. So it's just an incredibly important subject, and one we all need to be aware of. So I just wanted to throw that in while I had the chance.
So
Carry it to yourself.
scooch up. So perhaps now is the time to comment on emotional intelligence. Well, here's a little story that this crowd can relate to. Dan Goleman was not the originator of emotional intelligence. He was a savvy journalist sitting in the audience that my colleagues, David Caruso, Jack Mayer, and Pete Salovey, actually my closest colleague, David Caruso, they were the originators of the term. They were the academics, University of New Hampshire and Yale University, that really did the heavy lifting on the research, and Dan popularized it. The tests that, so I worked 10 years doing emotional intelligence. I had worked in the business world for a good 10 years and said, I'm done. The only way that I can do this is if I can have a greater impact, because I saw what people did to one another, and I thought it was awful. And I didn't know how you could divorce yourself from what you did at work and how you put your head on the pillow at night as a human being. Yeah, I didn't get it. And so as a very young child, I knew I was put on this planet to do something very different, and how human beings treated one another was not acceptable to me. And I was very fortunate. I grew up in a loving family, a great mom and a great dad, and it wasn't really that way when I entered into work. And again, to me, it was inexcusable that you could step over somebody to achieve some type of a goal. And it's even less excusable in this field to do something like that. I mean, to me, the stakes are even higher. So just a quick comment. What is emotional intelligence? It's really the capacity to use, quote unquote, both sides of your brain, you know, the left brain, the right brain, so to speak. It's being able to identify what you're feeling, to understand how that feeling is impacting your thought process, to know where that feeling is actually coming from. So what's the trigger of it? Is it something that's in your environment? Is it a person? Is it something that's going on obviously within you? And how are you managing that emotion? So those 4 basic questions are really key to knowing, you know, where you're at. You know, to me, that's the entry point into consciousness, is knowing what you're feeling. And especially now, it seems in the world that we're in, so many things are emotionally charged. And there's this slight polarization that's happening within people as well. So, you know, really being able to figure out what you're feeling and how that's guiding and directing your behavior is very important. And all the research, by the way, and there's tons of research on EI that basically shows us the most effective leaders have high levels of emotional intelligence, which is trainable. It's not something that you can't learn. I was part of a research study at the University of Chicago where we worked with MBA students for 10 weeks. And so my colleague David Caruso and we taught a specific class for 10 weeks, and it showed that students that cared about learning in regards to EI and actually did some of the curriculum were able to improve their scores. So the most effective leaders care about what's going on with the people around them. They understand that there's a significant impact to the actual work, and they're also able to manage what's going on within themselves. So nobody likes the boss that takes out their anger on other people, because there's an impact to that. So one of the last pieces that I think is important is, as I said a little bit yesterday, what we know about high-functioning teams is that a team that has a shared vision, and Erin, you talked about the visualization piece being key. So imagine having an intact team that is visualizing a goal, and they're holding that as well, right? That those are the types of teams that they can renegotiate along the way. High EI does not mean being nice all the time. It means being accurate with what you're observing and being able to call that out. So high EI teams actually resolve conflict really well because they don't ignore it and they don't have to fight over it for there's a winner and a loser. They actually see that conflict is a necessary part of moving forward. So the book, thanks Paul, that's a good segue, but the book is a great book. Dan's book is a great read. I'd highly recommend The Emotionally Intelligent Manager by David Caruso, and I wrote a couple of other pieces as well, which I can share with some of you, but those were published also.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah, go for it.
I know what she's saying is completely true because I've applied it for a lot of years. I worked for some of the biggest corporations in the world, managed projects around the world. I usually had a crew that I managed of 15 to 30 people. My crew was always the most effective crew. We went all over the world. We did everything. We were the top crew in the company, and we never had a bad word. I don't remember one moment in my crew in that particular 3 years where there's a bad word said. We're totally effective. Everybody loved to come to work. But yet at the same time, I've seen whole companies, multi-million-dollar companies, go down the tubes because of the lack of emotional intelligence. I've seen projects destroyed. I've seen money wasted like you wouldn't believe. And then I've seen other companies, other operations with high levels of emotional intelligence where that communication was there, that respect is there. There's a lot of aspects to it, and they always thrive. So if you have a problem with conflicts, you work in a company where everybody hates each other, emotional intelligence and that understanding is the place to start.
I think I can add a few things that tie emotion intelligence to creativity. When you analyze when it is that you're creative, you'll discover most of the time, the periods of your creativity occur when you're joyous and happy. And so, in order to get into the creativity zone, you sort of have to be emotionally positive. Now, you can't make yourself emotionally positive by trying to push away anything that's in you that's negative. You actually have to ground it. You have to transcend the negativity. So, for example, if there's something bothering you because you're angry at some other person because that other person did something to you that was not just, that was not fair, and whatever it was, if you have the anger, then it's going to limit your creativity. And how do you eliminate the anger? It's not something that you repress, but it's something that has to be transcended. And to transcend it, you have to understand what is it in you that has put this other person first in your consciousness rather than, and now you can use a number of words. If you want to be on the religious side, you can say God. If you want to be on the New Age side, you can say the cosmos. But it's very clear that if you have something that's at a higher level, that's always first in your mind, that will go with the joyous part, the happiness. And if you have something, a negative reaction towards some other person or institution or company or whatever, then that's going to limit and clamp you down. And so you have to figure out what is it in your belief system, what is it in your habits, your ethics, your character, that actually sees the situation as being negative. Because the negativity actually is a deficiency that you see in the situation of divinity. And so if you, it's not that the divinity is not in the situation, it is, but the deficiency is in our consciousness. So then you have to work on yourself to be able to do a reinterpretation of the situation, and that means you have to sacrifice something in yourself. And you don't have to go through a long line, a linear reasoning chain to figure this out. It will come to you right away, immediately. And you don't have to do any hard labor. You just make the change. Give up what you need to give up so that you see in the situation the positivity that it actually has, and then you just move on. You transcend it.
Well said, Bob.
I just want to add a little bit to that. I was talking to a young lady out here last night. She was asking me how I'm going to structure the company. And I said, definitely not corporate.
Well said.
And along with what you guys are both saying, I don't know the term emotional intelligence. I guess I should read that book because I think like that, and I didn't know anyone else did. So I'm real happy to learn that. But my idea of a company is that it should be a place when you get up in the morning, you're anxious to go be there. And that when you have bosses, you don't really have a boss. When you have executive vice presidents, you have all these titles. Those titles separate you from the people around you. So my idea was to give the titles for external consumption only, and internally in the company, everybody was equal, from the janitor to me, if I'm running the company. And if somebody comes to me and says, we have a problem here, this person's a backstabber, a manipulator, or whatever, then the solution isn't to say, okay, I know you better, and I need you first, and you're higher than them, so I'm going to fire them. I think the way to deal with it is you deal with it like group therapy. You bring everybody together, you identify the problem, you allow that person to grow through the problem, and you say, you know, these traits that you're exhibiting, they're negative, and our organization is going to be positive all the way as much as we can make it. And negativity is like a cancer, and if you can't cut out the cancer, you have to heal it, and if you can't heal it or cut it out, then I'm sorry, but you're going to have to go, because the organization is more important than just you. But in the real terms, right now, you're as equally as important as our company. But if you ignore that, and you ignore the rest of the health of the company, then you become a liability, and then you have to go. But you get a chance. And I was trying to examine structures, because like I was talking about spherical thought the other day, when you examine structures, you need to restructure something so it has balance, because balance will create a harmony that works with everybody. So I don't want to get into a long discussion about my thoughts on all this stuff, but it's very interesting that these social traits are learned from as a child. You've got a person who may be an only kid or in a large group of kids. and like in my family, my youngest brother, hypochondriac, manipulated my parents, you know, didn't get enough attention. He was a hypochondriac. He'd get attention that way. Got another brother who was greedy and selfish and manipulated things. My mother would go buy bananas and fruits, and they'd disappear. And one day, my mother was cleaning his room and found all of these fruits rotting, stuck up under the bed springs, because he was a very insecure child. And for some reason, he would grab all the fruit to make sure he got it, and he'd hide it in the bed and forget about it, and it stunk. But these traits, when you go in a corporate workplace, you see these people: the insecure person, the backstabber, the manipulator, the ladder climber. So anyway, if you can identify those people and get a chance to change, or if they can't change, get them out. Because what you really need is people with positive energy and passion. So that's all I want to say about that.
I don't know if I can add too much about subject of emotional intelligence, but I could talk about the importance of feelings and emotions in creativity, and which are stifled in education system. I've developed a theory called feeling tone theory, along with Bill Gray, psychiatrist, and the key idea there is that thought is basically feeling. Feeling tones sort of structured together as a thought. And so it explains how thoughts emerge, why basic shift from the previous views, that importance of nerves. The previous view was sort of the hardwired view. It's the impulses traveling down the nerves that are important. In our theory, it's the waveform, the wave, the electrochemical wave that has a certain shape, and that shape encodes the information. So information thereby is transported throughout the brain. The brain is really holistic. The cerebrum is really to give it more breathing room. So that we can work on separate ideas, and it's between the old brain and new brain. It's pretty much difficult to get into the whole theory, but it shows the importance of feelings, emotions, and like you mentioned about getting angry, that's a programmed survival system we have, because if a lion came in your path, you couldn't stand there and think, what am I going to do? You default to your programmed, the reptilian brain takes over, you know, fear, and you don't have to think about that. But it does cause problem in working on ideas, creativity. It gets suppressed when you get angry for that reason. It's important to keep yourself calm and positive environment, playful attitude, and creativity, and that's the best way.
Thank you. My interest, I'm not in the business world, but my interest is in how citizens organizations like the New Energy Movement can help this field, even getting local support, educating people around you. And I was living in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I was on the board of the New Energy Movement somewhere in the last 10 years. And I thought it might be a good idea to get some people together to see if we wanted to do something like a chapter, because I had friends who were interested in these topics. And so it started with about a dozen, half men and half women, as it turned out, meeting at my apartment, and there turned out there was interest. And the way we started was to meet once a month, and the guys that were technical and had something to teach the rest of us, kind of bring us along with some basic concepts about magnetism, electricity, whatever. That would be part of the meetings, informal. And then there the women, so there were a few women in the group who had organizational skills, not as high level as Susan's, but they were a real help. And so it was a good balance. We decided that we, as our group, worked out our mission statement, and it was kind of half educating the public, and then we really wanted to help support the inventors, few inventors in our midst. So to make a long story short, it grew gradually. The first maybe 6 months we didn't have any public events, but then I knew an inventor was coming to town, and we organized something that brought out, maybe 30 people from the public. But we learned, how to get out PR, and so we had monthly events bringing in speakers, and it grew to the point that the last year, it only went a couple of years, there were, at one point, 200 people came out to a downtown venue, and a woman, one of the people involved, brought her whole high school class on a bus, and it was really great, and all the networking that happens here was going on there. It was excellent. A lot of good things happened. Some people started working together. It started to break down when it got to that point where there was a stage and somebody was being the MC, and sometimes it went to that person's head, and egos started to swell because they were important, because they were blah, 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 and then maybe the women were relegated to, fetch and carry when it was really equal effort that created the event. Just little nonsense like that, which if we had had someone like Susan, we could have gotten through all that and worked through it, but the timing was just, okay, it had run its course. A few of us were ready to move away from Vancouver, and toward the end, my daughter-in-law was dying, and it was just not a time when I had any patience to deal with. And then I realized I don't have skills like this. So I really encourage people to consider starting similar chapters, but also, and make sure you include people who do have skills in keeping things going as harmoniously as possible. That was what I learned from that experience.
Just one more piece to add in here, because I'm realizing as we're talking about emotions and emotional intelligence, just to think about something for a minute, like what we're creating with these new energy technologies. We talk about when we get the technology or when we have it, then we'll experience this bliss. I think the bliss that we feel inside of ourselves is part of the creation of this to help that be sustaining. So I don't think it's when we get there, then we feel this way. I think we feel this way to get there to help sustain that, and then what beyond that to move that forward. It's like when you see that spark from your devices, or you feel the feeling when you see these devices go and work, it triggers something deeper in you, right? And I'm gonna take a little wild guess here to say, I don't think that we've even come close to seeing what our beautiful capacity is, what we create, and what that feeling is together when we have that. So, it's, to me, the emotional intelligence piece is, we're just scratching the surface to it, and where we go and what we create and how we feel. I don't even think we can imagine what that is yet. So, and we need each other to do that. It's like that feeling that you get when someone genuinely cares about you, or somebody genuinely does something positive for you. If if someone passes away that you care about, if you're sick, and someone does something out of a sense of, deep kindness, that feeling is intense, immense gratitude. So I just think that part was important to say. Thanks.
Hi, I've got a question for Susan. I've made an observation that if I get too busy and I don't spend time and spend effort in maintaining my social relationships, that my inventing skills seem to suffer. Would you like to comment?
I'm not clear on the question.
Does letting your social skills in dealing with other people, I've noticed that it seems to affect my ability to invent. If you spend too much time on the bench trying to work out something rather than spending time with other humans, that you kind of lose the plot.
Oh. That's a great question, actually. I have somebody raising their hand, so go ahead first. Can you speak up first, though? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say he needs to go out and have fun in order for his brain to then recalibrate to go back to thinking on the problem. You know what I mean? Like if you're just constantly looking at the same thing over and over, like it doesn't give your brain the variety that you need to be creative sometimes.
All work and no play.
Exactly.
Also stuck in a play a little bit.
Yeah.
Work hard, play harder.
Yeah.
Right?
There's really something to that. So the research shows that if you're, and I've done this experientially, like teaching, actually assessing thousands of people from all over the globe and working with thousands of people from all over the globe and it's hard for me to talk and look at you at the same time. So I keep having this issue with being on this stage. Yeah, just pick it up and hold it. So if you're stuck on a problem, the best thing to do is to get up and to walk away and to do something enjoyable for yourself, because it helps to release whatever's going on, and then you come back and approach it a different way. I'm from New England, and yes, I'm a Patriots fan, and I'm really sorry. But we have a great football. I know, it's all right. But one of the things that was really interesting was Tom Brady, one of his first of 5 Super Bowls, said that he took a nap right before the first Super Bowl. And if you remember, I think it was Drew Bledsoe who was playing, and then he got injured, and then Brady came in, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, but he took a nap before the Super Bowl. Like he laid on the bench at the stadium probably about 20 minutes before they were going out. And that never left me. I thought to myself, he took a nap? Wow, who does that? Like I was admiring it. And now looking to see, regardless of what you think about him, but it may be a little jealousy on your behalf, or man crush, however you look at it, on the side of the spectrum, he has gone on to be a remarkable football player, a remarkable quarterback. And he does practice a lot of, mind-body connection. And, that's just an example of being able to step away from a situation, to recalibrate, and then to come back to it. But I also will say, I think for those of us who get connections in different ways, whether it's synchronicity, I call it alternative ways of knowing or non-traditional ways of knowing, there's times that I know for me, I can't be around people. I need to be out in nature. I need to be alone. I'm sensitive as well. And sometimes too much human energy is a bit much for me. So I pull back, and I get people that get mad at me, family primarily. Well, how come you haven't called me and haven't talked on the phone? And it's difficult. It's energy. And there's times that I need to just pull back, because I need to be able to recalibrate with the ether and with divinity, and then I can come back to it. So I think it's knowing where you're at and what you best need for yourself in order to be able to then come back and deal with whatever you need to deal with successfully. So it's okay to take that break. Preventative measures as well, I just want to comment on this. I think I can speak for myself, doing this work, you really need to be in top shape. And I don't mean physically, I mean self-discipline with how your body is structured. Yoga is very helpful. Meditation is very helpful. Exercise, again, being in nature. We know these things, but sometimes when we're really driven to achieve a goal, we may not be taking care of ourselves. And I'll just repeat it one more time. Play is essential. Laughter is essential. Getting hugs is essential. You know, so these are aspects of our humanness that I don't think are going to go away anytime soon. I think, if anything, you know, being able to embrace more of that is helpful to us. So if there's anybody else who would like to comment, that would be lovely.
I just want to comment on the word play. We have a word that's also called work, and we all go to work. We need to make the work play. We need to make the work spontaneous, joyful, and play. And so I've been in the university system just for about a half a century now. And every day that I go with joy, and I play all day. And by the way, the work I do, it's hard work. People, you know, they look, they see. So it's not that nothing is being done. Something is being done, but the emotion and the relationship that I have with it is actually that one of play. And that enhances creativity, exactly as she says.
I wanted to pick up on the comment you made about divinity. Many, many years ago, when I lived in Los Angeles, I lived near Huntington Library, and they had a policy you could check out all the books you want, as long as you want, which I found surprising. And I was seeking spiritual growth, so I checked out the entire religion section. And I kept it for 3 months, and they thought that I stole them when I bring them back 3 months later. And I said, no, I was just reading them, they're here. But my point is this, I founded a religion later. I don't, no, I'll take that back. It was not a religion. It was not necessarily a church. It was an experiential. And the reason I founded it was because, and this goes into the way I'm going to structure my company, is when I went to churches, one thing I noticed of the structure, never mind what the doctrine was, the structure was one guy up at the front and a whole lot of pews. And this guy was communicating to them. And that to me is not spiritual. That's indoctrination. And I also found that most of these churches would say, eventually, very subtly, some even more overt, if you don't believe the way we believe, you're going to hell. And how many people have heard that? So I just thought that was totally offensive and very destructive. So we set up our church, and our first meeting, and they are still this way, when you come in there, you sit in a circle, and the first question we ask, and anybody can ask it, there's no leadership, there's no dominance, there's no submissiveness, there is a question. What in your life made you ever feel close to God, or recognize that God was there, or feel that God was there helping, or just you were in touch with? And people start crying and telling you all kinds of stories, and there's bonding, and there's all this stuff. And we use things like that. And I was reading a book, I think it was a Moto that was talking, you were telling me about him. I couldn't remember his name, but he examined water and crystal formations and how the negative energy and the positive energy affect it. And I'm quite sure you know a great deal more than I do about it, but I thought that was fascinating. So in a recent church service, we went down to the beach. We all sat in aluminum lawn chairs, and we put our feet in the water, took off our shoes and socks, and we did these meditations where we were trying to listen to whatever the water could tell us. And I thought that was really cool, and I got some great experience. Not at first, took a while. But my point is, spirituality really is important. And don't trade spiritual growth and learning and seeking for doctrine, because that's just about donations and buildings and all that, and none of that counts. What counts is what's in here and how you grow. And if you combine that with business structure and how businesses work, then corporate America would change radically, and it wouldn't be the mess it is. And you were talking about the big mess you find in corporate America, and you left it. I don't know why all of that, but I would presume that has something to do with it, is the spiritual nature of the people that you're dealing with. Because if you treat our school system, our corporate offices, you've all heard about Pavlov, right? I mean, you put rats in a box, and then you give them a reward to go to the next box, and they work through a maze. This is the kind of corporate structure we have. You got to look at the structure. When you're in school, what are you doing? You're rats in a box. You listen to indoctrination. The bell rings, you go to the next box. You get a reward, you get a little break in the next box, and then you get a lunch break, and you go to the next box. So the structure of it is compartmentalization. And that happens when you go to corporate offices. Individual separation or cubicles and hierarchies, all that should go away. It should be more like tribalism, one group, and an organism that's united. So anyway, I guess I'm getting on my soapbox, so I apologize, but let somebody else speak.
I do have a comment about the mind-body connection, and I know that people like simple tools that they can just go to, see something that teaches them how to do something, and then they can instantly practice it. One thing I would recommend, and when Paul mentioned the nervous system, it kind of reminded me of it, and I was going to ask if there's a physical component to the emotional intelligence side as far as a specific exercise or something to kind of clear some stress out of the body or whatever so that we can be more functional upstairs. But what I was going to mention is the true father of biofeedback is a man named Edmund Jacobson. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Edmund Jacobson. Okay, about 4 people or so. So hardly anybody knows about him, and there's people today whose work is based on his work, but they really don't give him any credit. I'm not going to mention who they are, but his original test was he had Bell Labs make a really powerful amplifier that would amplify signals from the nerves, and what he would do is they would literally insert an electrode straight into the muscles and then would ask different questions and stuff, and it would give a different kind of response, and depending on how much of something was maybe traumatizing or something, then you'd get this real strong response. To make a long story short, what came out of it was he developed a set of exercises called progressive muscle relaxation exercises, which maybe you may have heard of these exercises without knowing what they were, but basically you can lay down and you can tighten a muscle and relax, and you do it in your foot, you do it in your your calf and your thigh, and you kind of go around a series of muscles in your body. So let's just say your muscles are in tension at a level of 6 or something. Well, if you tighten it even more than you relax, it might go to a level of 4, which means you just drop the tension a couple points. See, the first thing to respond to the subconscious mind is the nervous system. And what the nervous system does is it's going to cause a muscular contraction somewhere in your body. And so what it does is each intention in the mind translates to a muscle which is literally in tension. The problem is as people go through their lives, a lot of these intentions in the mind and different experiences and things gets locked into tension in the muscles and the body, and people are walking around with all these tensions without even knowing it. People start literally walking around living their whole lives in their body, and they don't even know it. A lot of stress in the shoulders or in the back or whatever it happens to be. But if you look up the exercise progressive muscle relaxation, you can find free downloads and websites describing the exact method of the exercise. One thing about it is that that exercise was enhanced by somebody named Harold Chappell. Years ago, Peter and I worked on a project. Actually, the first thing we ever published with A&P Electronic Media was a manuscript. Actually, the collected works of Harold Chappell is called 16 Lessons in Advanced Perception. The very first, it was basically, he did a lot of case studies somewhere in Illinois at a Advanced Perception Institute. I can't really remember the name, but it was a case study where through thousands of people doing different exercises, over not that long of time, developed very highly developed psychic abilities. What the point is that that PMR, progressive muscle relaxation exercise, was modified to the point where it was just real rapid contraction and relaxation over and over and over in a specific method, and that was called the effort exercise. There's a lot of other exercises in there, but that one specifically you can look up on any website, the PMR. But if you're interested, you can go to emediapress.com and you can find that compilation of work called Lessons in Advanced Perception. And by doing those exercises, what it's doing is it's clearing those locked-in tensions inside the body, because what it does is it changes the signal-to-noise ratio in your mind, your subconscious ability to tap into the collective and then percolate it up into your conscious awareness. And there's going to be a lot of noise, very little signal, and so you're going to change it to where the signal is up here and there's very little noise. The less noise there is, the more clear you are on information that your subconscious is trying to feed to you that it has complete, infinite access to in the collective. And so, and then the art and science of that concept of the subconscious mind being the first thing to respond to subconscious stimuli is known as ideomotor effect. And so a lot of these things are programmed habits that people are just kind of operating out of a reflex, and they think that just because thoughts are going through their mind that they're thinking. And they're not. They're on autopilot. And so I break a lot of that down in some other exercises that you can find. I put together a book called A Course in Mind Power. That's also available at emediapress.com. And I think if you just kind of read that website, you know, even if you don't want to buy it, and I'm not mentioning it to try to sell a book, but I mentioned Lessons in Advanced Perception and A Course in Mind Power at each panel discussion, because it has important keys to enhance people's awareness, not just their awareness, but actually raise consciousness to a level that's expanded beyond wherever somebody is going to take them out to that next level. And so that's just a couple things that I want to mention. So.
A very, very simple comment that I would make is, and it's very simple, do something that scares you. So do that thing that you're afraid of. Now, granted, if it's jumping off a cliff, you may want to have a safety mechanism. But seriously, what Aaron said is our bodies, we are walking around, some of us, I won't say all of us, are walking around with that pre-programmed fear body. And the culture that we live in, the environment, if you watch TV, I mean, there you go right there. There's a lot that's already in there. And again, absolutely right, you can't have that, the access to the infinite information flow through if the valve is closed, and fear it constricts, and anger constricts as well. So having that more openness, and some of us, there's subtle emotions with fear, and there's subtle emotions with anger, but some of it's a little bit deeper, and some of us do have these more deep-seated, negative emotions, and sometimes addressing that thing, whatever that big thing is, and work to move through that is a very big help to relax more of whatever, because it's not just always in the physical, right? There's more that's going on. So find that one thing that you are scared by and see if this is now the time to work to overcome that. And you'll find, well, I was scared of this, and I overcame that. Now I realize I'm afraid of that, so now I'm going to try to overcome this. So it's moving. If you usually move right, you might want to try moving left.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I'd like to comment exactly on that example there. When I was in the 9th grade, and remember my Miss McGraw's speech and drama class, and I played some farmer in a skit called Jack and the Beanstalk, and there was because the giant fell to his death, Jack was put on trial for the murder, and I was a farmer who witnessed it, and we had like 5 or 6 plays at school that day. Well, I had such incredible stage fright and hated public speaking, and was very shy and introverted. I'm actually very introverted. I kind of like to keep to myself and just have kind of a close-knit group of friends, and so public speaking is not really like my favorite thing to do. But I found that on stage, doing that skit, I just busted out laughing in a nervous laugh. The whole audience is roaring. My teacher is, pissed beyond belief. Oh man, did she let me have it? And I did that a few times. And but what I told myself, see, the reality was I was just nervous, and it was something that I didn't find a way to become comfortable with yet. So I lied to myself. I told myself that, you know what, well, public speaking is not my kind of thing. I don't want to be out in front of people, and I just need to operate behind the scenes. And that became the, you know, the illusion and the lie that I lived for, you know, many, many years, convincing myself of that. You know, so today when you see these panel discussions, you know, doing the conference and stuff, you know, it actually, behind the scenes, it was always my passion to go out there and want to share things because I think I have something to contribute. And I was tired of, you know, so-called playing small. And that's something that a lot of people experience and are, you know, in the habit of doing that, and they're justifying it by a complete lie, and they're buying their own lies. And fortunately, I had a mentor one time, and, you know, he says, you know, I don't care, you know, if you lie to me, if you lie to your parents, if you lie to anybody else, but don't ever let me catch you lying to yourself. And because it's the most destructive thing you can do. So over the time, I stopped buying my own BS on a lot of different things, and after that point, I refused to buy anybody else's excuses. And those of, you know, my closest friends, they know that as soon as I hear anything that's even remotely close to an excuse, they get slapped down pretty quick, because I'll call them on it. But I ask their permission ahead of time. Do you really want me to keep you accountable on this? You know, do you actually realize what you're asking? You know, because I'll, you know, bring it down pretty hard, and we got to keep ourselves straight. And so, you know, trying to moderating a panel discussion, this isn't like my favorite thing in the world, but I've done it, I don't know, it's maybe the 5th time. I don't know if we did this the first conference or whatever. But, you know, I'm always putting myself in a position to where I have to, and doing things that, you know, I'm not always the most comfortable doing, but I do it because I know, you know, kind of what it leads to. So, absolutely everything you said is dead on, and I'm, you know, living proof.
Helps us spiral up, too.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to share that experience.
Yeah.
Are there any questions, or I mean, we can? Yeah, go ahead. We'll wrap it up here in just a couple minutes.
The things that you mentioned about the working with the heart and the spiritual things and these things, dealing with human beings, these are the essentials as far as I'm concerned. One of the things that really primary for me, that's been really something I've needed to focus on in these last many months, is self-forgiveness. Is, you know, like, I'll get upset at, you know, I'm building something or something, and I'll throw a fit and bust something, and then, so as not to stay in that crappy mood that I've built for myself, it's time to relax, release it, forgive myself, and get back in the place that I usually prefer to be. And that's been really essential for me. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, Aaron, about, and if this is not pertinent to this discussion, then you can just pass it by, but my next project that I want to do is I want to take that motorhome out there that's running a big ass 454 and put that ignition system in it, your ignition, plasma ignition, and water and electrolysis and whatever that I can do to really get some extraordinary mileage on it. And I was wondering if you'd ever run your system through any sort of distribution, or is it coil-on plug type that is only going to work, or is that addressed in your book?
What kind of ignition system? Do you have a regular?
It's a GMHEI.
Does it have a normal type of distributor or anything? Or?
Basically, you know, the coil on top and the GM
Oh, it
system.
is a COP style?
Yeah. Oh, no, it's not COP. It's a coil on the top of the distributor, the older 84 GM HEI ignition, high energy ignition.
Do you have like a visible access to a spark plug sticking out of the side of the head?
So you have on the side of the head, in between the headers, yes.
So it's easy to get to the plugs and...
Yeah, relatively easy.
And are most likely there's a CDI or an MSD available for that particular ignition system?
I suspect so.
Then it's easy. You just put that on, and then you just add the diode.
Okay, and then run it through the
to the top of each plug in between, underneath the boot, and then you already have it.
Okay. Okay. So I can just run it through the system that that's pre-existent.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You might have to just use low or non-resistor plugs.
Okay.
And doesn't matter about the cables, because if you're running the high voltage diode from the cap in the MSD or the CDI directly to the top of the plug, you're not doing that high speed discharge to the ignition cables anyway. And so you can keep your cables, put low resistor plugs. You might need a little better ignition coil, but yeah, any off the shelf MSD or CDI that's available for your car, you put it on, add the diodes, and then you're done.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Or
I'd like to make a comment.
yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Since Dr. LaViolette was so gracious to come and speak to us, I'm a big fan of the doctor here, and his theory, in my opinion, is one of the most important theories that's come along, and I recommend everybody read his book and support his works, because I've been looking into anti-gravity my whole life, gravity effects, and his is the only workable, really, theory I've ever seen that really is workable in that department. And another thing is, a lot of it is we need to know that knowledge for ourselves. It's been developed, kept secret for years, and when it's not a secret, it can't be used against us. So we paid for it. I want to know about it. And I know they're not going to tell me, so I got to figure it out. So I cannot express enough how important Dr. LaViolette's work is, and we should all support him, help him to find funding, and take an interest in everything he does, because it's very incredible. And on top of that, he's a very brave man, because he's one of the few academics I've seen that just stands up and speaks the truth and doesn't put his rice bowl or his reputation ahead of the facts and the truth. So he really deserves a hand for coming here and helping us. And one more comment. I forgot to add something in my slide yesterday. When I said you're all as powerful as atom bombs, I meant that. Yeah. The difference being is that atom bombs are a destructive force, and you are a creative force with the power of an atom bomb behind you, every one of you. So use it, because you're far more important than us up here with the inventors. Without you, we can't make it work. So put your atom bomb powers to work. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Maybe one final question, comment, and we'll go ahead and finish. Okay.
Okay. My name's John Stoll. I have a passion for cosmology and having a
closer to the mic.
Oh, yeah. I have a passion for cosmology, and I want to refine a unified theory. And I'm looking forward to, after my head's done spinning from this weekend, reading the quantum key and the subquantum kinetics, and your suggestion for the Seth materials. As I mentioned those in cosmology, can you highlight any particular things that come to mind as to connecting the dots?
You mean to replace the Big Bang Theory?
Well, yeah, you throw out the Big Bang Theory, but you know, just to connect the dots and all the ideas that you guys have written about, maybe highlight some chapter or two that will connect Aaron's ideas with Paul Violette's ideas, or maybe something that Seth has said that correlates with some of the subject matter of cosmology.
Well, the one commonality is the ether, maybe. Seth talks about the ether, right? And in fact, I think it's a dynamic type ether, right?
Exactly. Conscious.
And sustaining everything. This that we can't see. What we can't see is sustaining everything we can see. And we should be thankful for that. It's not something that happened billions of years ago. It happens this minute. The whole getting into this physics shifts your whole point of view, your whole paradigm, and it's towards a more positive view, I think.
Aaron, anything from your material that ties in?
Not really sure how to comment on that, but I'm looking forward to learning more about Paul's work. And but I would say, in terms of the ether, to me, it always has been the substance of consciousness itself. I didn't go into that in my presentation, but that's kind of, it builds from there up. So,
Okay,
or
that-
top down, or whichever direction you want to look at it. But
Okay, that does help the focus. Thank you.
thanks. One final comment, or oh, you can go up to the microphone, Justice.
Your friend Tom Bearden said that teleportation is possible. In fact, he said that at one point. He teleported away into deep space somebody who was otherwise gonna kill him because he was a free energist. Aaron, is that true that teleportation is possible with all, which I find plausible given all the exotic physics that I've learned about?
Okay, there's a couple of things there. I've heard of, first of all, I've never heard of Tom Bearden claiming that somebody was teleported out, him or somebody else, because of being involved with this science. There has been some interesting teleportation experiments done, like at the molecular level. I don't know a lot about them. I've just seen kind of these little buzz headlines kind of going through some of the things. But to my understanding, Lear had done some successful teleportation things at a little bit larger scale. I can't prove it, but that's all I can really say about it.
Otis?
No, I
What
mean,
about Otis?
Yeah, we got one more.
oh yeah, I'm not sure.
Aaron, there was a video you showed, came from Germany. It was like a laser light diffraction pattern ether
Yeah.
interferometer.
Mhm.
What a term. I was curious if you guys could go on a bit about what you think about that, its implications.
Well, it looks like it's showing that the ether is moving from above and moving down towards the mass. And so that's what I've believed from the beginning when I saw that. I already had that belief, and when I saw that experiment, it shows me that it looks like that's in fact what's happening. I think it's the most astounding interferometer experiment that's ever been done. It's out of the box because everybody has done it in a million different ways on a horizontal plane, and this is doing it on the vertical one. And that's where the influence is coming from, is on that plane. Anybody can look up the website or see these on YouTube. It's Martin Grusnick. I think it's Grusenick. And there's both German and English version of that experiment. But I'd like to replicate it. I contacted Edmund Optics. I don't know if it's related to Edmund Scientific or whatever, but they have some pretty, so Edmund Optics, the parts, because they have all the stuff necessary to put together an interferometer if you want to do those type of experiments, and they seem to have the best quality stuff, and the full package is something like, I don't know, $3,500 or something like that, and which was nice to know, but that wasn't going to happen at this conference anytime soon. But the parts are there available. I mean, for $3,500, somebody could do it at a very high precision level with the best quality parts you can get. I think other people need to experiment with it. It's too simple not to do, I think. But I don't really know what else to say about it, but I think it kind of gives pretty good support of the idea that the ether is moving from here in the downward direction, and not in this direction. So.
Would it be downward toward the center of the earth?
Yeah, from all the way around.
Okay, because I just thought it would be clarified from a rigorous
Yeah.
statement.
Just to mention, it's interesting, so many years, they were all doing it horizontal. It's sort of like they were trapped in that mindset. And then finally, it took so long, finally somebody just turned it. It's interesting, huh? And actually, it's a confirmation of subquantum kinetics. Because subquantum kinetics says that the Earth is consuming the G ether. It's converted into other ethers, and so G etherons are continually flowing down. So it predicted you would have this vertical flux into the Earth, and that gradient that's associated with the flux is gravity. It's what pulls us to the Earth. So it's a very interesting experiment to prove that that's the case.
That's one of the reasons, one of the original, I think at last year's conference, Gene Manning had recommended that I get in touch with you to possibly speak, and I think I emailed you about the
it didn't work out last year
thruster or something, and but you had mentioned that you know about his work with the subquantum kinetics and mentioned a lot of parallels with what I've been involved with, and so I'm kind of tripping out. That was pretty cool, but I am absolutely looking forward to learning more and talking with you on some of this. So.
Hey, I first want to say thank you for all the comments on consciousness in this year's conference. Watched a few previous videos. This is my first time attending, but I think it was really cool that everybody had their own take on, you know, consciousness and its effect on your interaction with other people in the work. My question is for you, Aaron. You mentioned some education and interest in remote viewing. And I'm just wondering, you've also mentioned the Seth material.
Well, I didn't mention Seth. Paul did.
Paul did, okay.
Yeah.
Well, beyond that, where would you recommend somebody begin research into, you know, expanding the mind with like remote viewing type stuff?
In my book, A Course in Mind Power, I go heavy into the ideomotor effect as that, you know, the nervous system is the first thing to respond to from subconscious stimulation. Anything coming from the collective, the subconscious mind latches onto it and it feeds it through your body through the nervous system. However, that's going to play out in your body. So technical remote viewing is the most authentic remote viewing protocols. Those are the ones that are the most original, that were originally declassified when it was developed at Stanford Research Institute. It was originally called coordinate remote viewing as a reference to map coordinates that were given to a coordinate remote viewer, and then they could do a session completely blind, meaning they don't know what's at those coordinates, and I don't know, 30, 40 minutes later give you very highly refined data of exactly what's at those map coordinates. That was taught to Department of Army, I believe, Defense Intelligence Agency, and some other things. There's some, okay, sorry, there's something I was going to share, but I shouldn't. But in any case, when it was finally developed and refined more, and then it turned into what was known as technical remote viewing, and then eventually General Stubblebine and one other individual had it permission to get it declassified, brought it out into the private sector under the corporation SciTech. That was originally with General Stubblebine, Ed Dames. Joni DeRiff was the one who was the trainer. She was a top trainer, also very highly naturally psychic. Her and Ed Dames were married during this time. General Stubblebine was part of the company. He sold off, I guess, his shares of it, and eventually Ed Dame got out of that. I know why he got out of that. They separated. Dane Spots. I don't know if you've ever heard of Zygon. Anybody familiar with Zygon? One person, 2 people, 3 people. So back in about 1987 or so, I was in the 9th grade.
The movie, you mean?
No, Zygon Company.
Oh.
And when I was in about 9th grade, it was about 1987 or so, I used to go to the Stars and Stripes bookstore on a base, on an Air Force base over in Japan. And one of my favorite magazines was Omni Magazine. It had a lot of science stuff in there, but it also had things about alien abductions and UFO stuff, and there might have been some nefarious intentions behind that magazine experimenting on the public's minds, but I don't know if I can say anything else about that. But some of the ads in the back of the book were pretty interesting, but one of them was 28 minutes to the mind of a Zen monk, and it was these binaural beat cassette tapes. They're like 50-something bucks or something, which was like astronomically ridiculous for a broke, Air Force brat growing up with no job. How am I going to come up with 50-something bucks for like 2 tapes? But Ed Dames is the one who started that company a long time ago, and it's a brainwave synchronization. Basic, real simple binaural beats. I've produced a lot of free binaural beat MP3s and stuff online that you can find. If you search my name in binaural beats, there's maybe 5 or 6 different ones you can download. Those are actually more powerful than is usually given credit to it. I think they're very, very underrated. All the ones I deal with have no subliminal messages in them. It's just a straight frequencies, ones to put you into deep sleep, theta state, alpha state, beta state. I recently made one in the gamma state and 40 hertz. Put those on YouTube. You can just listen to it for a short 30-minute or 1 hour session or whatever. So, for example, if you're listening to say 100 hertz in the left ear, 90 hertz in the right ear, your corpus callosum is kind of like the traffic director between the left and right hemispheres, and so the frequencies cancel out, and you wind up with a difference of 10 hertz. So your whole brain synchronizes to that 10 hertz rhythm. So you can make it so your brain waves will synchronize at any frequency that you want. That's a very, very powerful technology. I overused it at one point. I was doing it maybe 6 hours a day every day for months. If you know about foot reflexology points and stuff like that, or on your hands or whatever, my hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal gland got so overstimulated that spots on my body were burning that corresponded to those parts. After that, literally, I laid off, and I don't really even use them very much anymore. 30 minutes a day, maybe once a day, the max. And I'll tell you from personal experience, don't do it more than that. It is very powerful, and it will help you to develop whole brain thinking. It'll bring balance between your left and right brain and your audio and visual centers. And so it's, they're worth more than their weight in gold. But you can find a bunch of free ones. I have a whole library online that you can download of those. But the remote viewing, Dane Spott's Texas Attorney General shut down Zygon, and then eventually he opened it back up with Mindtech, but he's the owner of SciTech now. Technical remote viewing, that's the best protocols. They used to have a couple generations of VCR tape training systems, which is the exact training by Joni Dorif, as if you were in the Army and receiving the training. That is the original protocols. A lot of the other remote viewing training systems out there are okay, but they're all bastardized. The reason is because they have to get around the proprietary copyrighted protocols owned by SciTech. So that's why you have to go to SciTech to get the original real stuff. That's the best methodology you can get. But anyway, that's available. But the VCR tapes, there's a Generation 1 kit or Generation 2 kit. That was the best one if you can find it on eBay or whatever. But Dane Spott's in SciTech, he made an online training system. It works. Throughout my life, I've had kind of some natural abilities to see things. Whether coming up in the future, seeing, which is highlighted in some of the stuff that I put in the Course in Mind Power book. But the remote viewing is really not just like a psychic development tool. You can learn it even if you're not really you don't consider yourself to be very intuitive. Somebody who I was partners with for a long time, he's one of the best remote viewers in the world. He knows how to cue up the target more accurately and in the best way than probably anybody else in the world, and he considers himself to be a psychic as a box of rocks, because it's not dependent on your own psychic ability. And really, the way to describe what remote viewing is it's an attention management skill, or an awareness management skill. So it's when you're doing a session, it's not like you're in a trance or anything. It's like you're maybe concentrating on a complicated math problem and how you kind of feel like that. You're consciously aware that you're kind of there, but your awareness is a little bit kind of bilocated, kind of elsewhere up in the mind space, and that's kind of how it feels. But what it is there is the intrinsic reality to what's going on, but then there's the stuff that we turn it into, because our carnal reasoning mind, that diabolical little machine inside of our head that takes input and assigns a meaning to it, is what's emblematic, is represented by the serpent in the Garden of Eden, for example. Is that part of the mind that's going to say, well, this is this and this is that. That's that judgment-making machine. It's not about getting in, being like a Zen master where you have no thoughts and you're just channeling this stuff, from the collective. It's about being able to methodically walk yourself through a process where you can take information from the collective, let your subconscious mind deliberately feed it and percolate it up into your conscious awareness in a very structured manner, where you can bring information about anything, textures, colors, smell, taste, sounds, temperatures, and dimensions, and in that exact order of pretty much anything, in the past, present, or future, it doesn't matter. But what it is when you get a piece of raw data coming from the collective, for example, maybe it's like red. Well, that's a piece of raw data. But what does a little serpent inside everybody's head do is it's going to instantly associate it. Oh, stop sign, apple, you know, something like that. Well, maybe it is, but it's not your time, your business at that time to determine that. And so it's not about blocking your mind from doing the, being human. It's about knowing that you have this data coming through and knowing that you have this mechanism inside the head that's doing that, and knowing how to tell the difference. Which there's a lot of trainings that let people know what's going on and what you're turning it into, which is really false and deceiving. And through the experience of doing remote viewing, you actually become a lot more clear on these internal processes going on, where you can see what's real in front of you and what you're turning it into. And so you have a choice to either see things as they are or let the little serpent turn it into something for you and then believe the lie. And so, you know, for example, you know, biblically, when they say when two eyes become one, that's the process right there, is taking that judgment and then seeing things as they are, which means you're turning from a slave of that into the master, and you have it that you can be able to use it at your disposal instead of it running you, which most people are in autopilot mode thinking that that voice in their head is them when it's really not. And then to be able to know the difference, that's when we flip it on it, and it's the most powerful tool. But that's the process of awakening and self-realization, you know, which is the original teachings, regardless of what religion it is. Unfortunately, no churches or anything really focus or teach that. But the entire Garden of Eden is nothing more than a manual on how to examine what the conscious process is. It's all about the mind. The Garden of Eden is just emblematic of a mind untainted by judgment. And so, I don't, you know, but anyway, that's, you know.
I'd like to respond to that. You know, I'm just absolutely blown away by this conference. It's the first time I've ever been here. Most of what these people are talking about, I've experienced, and just now, first time Aaron's ever mentioned this stuff. So we got a lot more to talk about. Because in 1970, when I was experimenting with religious philosophies and spiritual growth, I actually built an oscillator frequency generator, and I built it in a giant coil into, you know, those magnetic plastic signs you stick on the car. I bought some of that magnetic material. I made a 4-foot circle, put a coil in it, oscillated the coil at those beta theta frequencies, trying to induce those states mechanically and technically and electronically rather than just through meditation and yoga. And then we built a coil you'd put around your head, and then we would sit and meditate, and we'd change the frequencies so they're synchronous. And that's a cool word because there's a lot of synchronicity in this place, and I really like that. But we would experiment with cards and identify cards. You know, I'd hold a card, and I would say, I'd read, oh, I wouldn't say it, but that's a 7 or whatever. And the other person would sit on their mat, and we raised our ability to hit on point and exactly about 80% doing that. And I just thought it was fascinating stuff. So that's back in the 1970s, so it ages me a bit. But anyway, here's this guy who I just recently met, and he's doing the same sort of things and into that with this other guy you were talking about. And I didn't even know that. That's really cool. So I want to say something about spiritual connections. I came here to talk about technical stuff. I had no idea this kind of stuff was as metaphysical, and I love it, but it's also technical. So I'd like to ask you guys, do you experience on a regular basis, I mean, when you're here, a lot of you have been here many times, do you connect spiritually on these higher consciousness levels? Because I'm going to be back. I really like that. And, you know, it's just, I talked a lot of business with people here, and you know, when you're on a business level, there's walls there because you're cautious and you're trying to figure out, is this guy trying to take advantage of me? Is this guy spiritually healthy and clean, or is he greedy, or what's this person's really core belief? And so you have these walls. But when we started talking about astral travel, which I've been doing since late 70s, and remote viewing, which I didn't know anybody here would be talking about that. That's just cool. And I love, because you talk about that kind of stuff around most people, and their eyes glaze over, and they start looking to the exit. And so I don't usually talk about that, but here I found a lot of resonance with that, and I was talking about it with people, and I bonded more quickly, and I got a lot of good new friends for life here. So this is really cool. So hold up your hand if you've kind of experienced the consciousness thing here. Wow, that's awesome. I figured maybe 4 or 5. Look at that. That's pretty cool. Good job, buddy.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I keep coming back here. Who do I know would be here? It's got to have a spiritual component for me. Absolutely. Related to all this, a very good video to see is the Celestine Prophecy. Many have probably seen it. Sort of describes, the synchronicity and following your intuition. It's very good. Book, yes. It's also a book, but the video I like better actually.
Oh. Since we're on the subject of consciousness, I was wondering if anybody is following, the Schumann resonance that gives us 7.8 hertz for the longest time. I would say 30 or 40 years while it has been observed, and give us consciousness, and our whole perception system is based on that, which we have built into our brain to tune into that on a daily basis. Now, lately I have reports that Schumann resonance has dramatically gone off the charts, like it's at 40 hertz right now. Is being daily monitored in one of 2 stations that I know of. One is in California, one is in the Soviet Union, and they give out a daily report where the Schumann resonance is right now, which is about 4 times the level that we are hardwired to tune into. So I was wondering if anybody of you has any experience with that, or has the latest information on it, how we can utilize that, and finally forward our own agenda over unity, advanced healing, on and on it goes. That should be all included in that message.
I just have one short comment on that, which is I've thought for a long time that with the Schumann resonance at that theta kind of frequency is that when you go into a passive state of mind, the Earth is going to train you down to that, so you have more clarity about what's happening in the collective, more. And so, and if that was supposed to be raising up, which means we're going to be able to be tapping into that at a normal conscious waking state, more and more and more, is kind of a thought that I had. But I've never followed the Schumann the resonance, what it's doing, or.
I would advise anybody, to look into that from now on, because it could be an additional source for our consciousness and evolution, and learn more.
Actually, here in the last year, with what I've been dealing with the Lukovsky and the sudden study of the ionosphere and the atmosphere, Schumann resonance I've been actually trying to get a handle on it, but it jumping to 40 hertz, that's really a dramatic event, so I'm going to check into that for sure. I mean, very dramatic, so I'll look into that. Thank you for the hint.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I vaguely remember Schumann, the name, from years and years ago, but I do remember reading when I was studying this stuff that the American Native Indians, certain tribes, I think it might have been a tribe in the north, but definitely the Seminoles, I read about this, that when they were running for miles and miles and miles, and they didn't have cars, obviously, so they ran. And that was before, I guess, they had horses. And the Spanish arrived with horses, but this is before that. They would hug pine trees, because pine trees have a resonance at 7 point something. It's probably close to Schumann's thing. And that was one of the first times I became aware of frequencies, resonance with inanimate objects and the earth and things like that, and I thought that was really cool. So I think that's a whole scientific area that needs to be developed. So, but thank you for that, that's cool.
Is that where the term tree hugger came from?
I like that's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're...
I'd like to make an important comment. Do you know, organizing a conference is not easy. There's a lot of work, and the people who come to the conference, you don't see the work, all of the work that has gone on. And I know that because there were many times that I have organized conferences. And so I think Aaron needs to be thanked for all of the work that he's put in that allows us to come together and have our discussions. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for trusting us with your time. I know what it takes. I enjoy going to conferences myself, and I know what it takes to take off a whole weekend, leave town, go somewhere else. Sometimes you have to take time off of work, time away from family. Thank you for that. And any comments, questions, or suggestions, let us know what we can do to make the conference better. Thank you, Professor Herlick, for that. I really appreciate that. And thank you all. Register for 2018, and we'll see you next year. Okay.